Hi, and welcome back to You Handled That Perfectly. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Carly.
We're best friends, moms, and entrepreneurs here to talk about the messy, beautiful, and sometimes chaotic journey of balancing business, motherhood, and life. Let's get into it. In today's episode, we're diving into procrastination and work avoidance. Those moments where you know exactly what you should be doing, but you find yourself doing literally anything else. Maybe you are deep cleaning your kitchen or doom scrolling on social media. Or honestly, maybe you're just frozen. We've all been there. And we want to talk about it with some honesty, some science, and as always, a lot of grace.
This is such a great episode to come after our priority episode because now you've set your priority mainly, and here you come with procrastination and work avoidance. Not really doing those priorities potentially.
Defeats the purpose.
Yeah. And we're not just talking productivity. It's not about pushing harder or grinding more because you guys all know how we feel about the hustle culture and how against it we are. Procrastination actually has roots. It's emotional, it's neurological, sometimes it's physical. And avoiding work, we want to tell you, doesn't mean that you're lazy or even that you're unmotivated. It just means that there's something deeper going on. So today we want to really get into it with research and our stories and some strategies to help you next time you're feeling really stuck.
You just said that procrastination isn't about being lazy, and I could not agree more. So let's start this off by setting the foundation. According to the American Psychological Association, procrastination is the voluntary delay of an intended action, even though you expect that delay to make your situation worse.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the wild part. We know it will hurt us and we do it anyway.
Because we're self-destructive.
Exactly. Because procrastination is about managing emotions, not time.
Oh.
I've never really thought about it that way before. There was actually a study in 2013 that showed that procrastination is really about avoiding negative feelings. So maybe you feel overwhelmed, maybe you're afraid you'll mess up, or maybe you don't even know why it makes you anxious. It just does. When we procrastinate, we're actually choosing short-term mood repair over looking at your long-term goals. It's like saying, I know this needs to get done, but not right now. My brain doesn't want to. So we scroll, snack, rewatch that comfort show we've seen 800 times.
Even if it's Criminal Minds.
And it does make sense neurologically that your brain is just trying to soothe itself, even with Criminal Minds.
Hey, my brain soothes itself with true crime or fake crime as far as Criminal Minds goes. Historical fiction crime, if that's something. Actually, it's interesting because this is tied, like you said, to our emotional brain, the limbic system, and we want instant gratification.
Yep.
Huge shock. Of course we do. We want things right away. We want to accomplish it right away. We want overnight success. We want those things. We want that instant gratification.
We want that dopamine hit.
Totally. And you know what's uncomfortable? Starting things that are uncertain or finishing something that might be judged. And so your brain says, let's just not do that. The part of your brain that is handling planning or decision making has to come in and say, oh no, actually you should. And so I think it's interesting which part of your brain you're using more in order to make your decisions on whether you're procrastinating or not procrastinating.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that.
I am more logical, as we know, and I am more on that side of the brain that handles the planning and decision making. So for me, actually, it's not procrastinating brings me peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
So my prefrontal cortex is stronger than my limbic system, which is prefrontal cortex, planning, limbic system, emotions.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah. But it helps to know that procrastination isn't just a certain person thing. It doesn't tie into your age or anything like that. I mean, our brains are developing always, let's say. But really, your brain is still highly developing until you're 25, at least into your 20s. And then hi, welcome to 40 when perimenopause hits or when all these other things hit and your brain changes again. I mean, anything we do affects how our brain works. If your procrastination has changed over time or throughout your lifetime, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, think about that for women, for mothers. Your brain is still developing until at least 25. At some point, if you're a mom, you have kids within,
Either before or after that.
Yeah, either before or after that, and generally by the time you're 40, mid-40s. So, mom brain is a thing, pregnancy brain is a thing. Our brains go through a lot over the course of, I was gonna say 20 years, but really our lifetime.
Totally. Yeah, and so the parts of our brain that we use changes as well.
My husband and I are constantly reminding ourselves that the prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until 25, and that's why our kids have no impulse control. And it's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around. We know it, and yet we constantly have to tell each other, okay, they can't help it. They can't help it. It's their brain, it's how they're wired.
Yes. I tell my husband all the time when he asks why our son is doing something, I say, because he's 3.
Yes, exactly. Because that is developmentally and emotionally appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why is he crying? Because I moved his ball because he's 3.
Yeah. And honestly, it's probably related to something else anyway.
Yeah. And we don't know all the things, like, because we send our kids to school, we don't know all the things that happen during the day that maybe somebody else took a toy from him and he didn't lash out at school because he's very well behaved there. And then when I moved the toy, it set him off. It just triggered him. But we don't know that.
Yeah. That's exactly what happened in our house last night. My son started getting really emotional, and I looked at the clock and I said, "Did you have a long day?" And he said, "Yeah, I did." I just realized that we have to be situationally aware when it comes to our children's brains. And honestly, we give them grace, so why can't we give ourselves grace?
Because we're our own worst critic.
True.
It's hard. It's hard to see it. It's easier to see it in other people
Yeah.
than in ourselves. With kids, it's just like you said, we have to remember their brain isn't fully developed, and where they're at right now, you have to kind of meet them there.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be the same if somebody had dementia or something. You have to meet them where their brain is at. And why don't we do that with ourselves?
I can't wait for our perimenopause episode, something that is becoming more widely talked about, and maybe women will start to have more grace with themselves.
I'm excited for that episode too, mainly because I think a lot of people our age don't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know much about it, but I'm in it because newsflash, it starts 10 years before menopause.
So crazy.
So we're actually going through all these changes for longer than you would think. And anyway, I'm just excited to do the research on it and learn more about it and learn more about what's happening with my body and my brain.
So, speaking of you doing more work, let's talk about work avoidance.
Ooh, yeah.
Something you don't do. It's a weird thing where you really do care about something and you want to make progress, but instead you find yourself avoiding it. We talked about that a little bit. Sometimes the more you care, the more you avoid. I think that's where the fear creeps in too. Fear of being judged, fear of failure. And honestly, something that people don't think about very often is fear of success. If I actually finish this, then what? What if it's not good enough? Or what if people see it and think I'm a fraud? Or what if I finish this and it's amazing and I become a success? Even that's scary to people.
Either way, it changes your life.
Absolutely.
And change is scary.
Yeah. Dr. Ellen Hendrickson is a clinical psychologist, and she explains that procrastination can actually stem from fear of not measuring up. It's like your brain says, if I don't try, then I can't fail. So instead of doing the thing, we wait until the pressure is high enough that we have to do it. And then if it's not perfect, we can blame the timeline instead of ourselves.
Oh my gosh, it's so true.
It's like having a built-in scapegoat.
Yes. Like,
That's so
crazy.
crazy.
Well, I rushed this, so of course it's not going to be perfect.
Yes.
Oh, that project was rushed.
It's just another situation where someone's making an excuse versus taking ownership and accountability for something.
And I think it's important to say that this could be about big things, but it also can show up in really small everyday things too, like avoiding responding to that email or putting off paying a bill, reading that text you don't want to read. They're not always big, huge things that we have to do that we're procrastinating on. And honestly, they're like not always rational either. Why aren't you responding to that text message? There's something deeper happening, and it's probably emotional. So your body's trying to protect you from discomfort because you know that maybe that text is going to lead to a conversation you don't want to have, or paying that bill means seeing money come out of your bank account. So there's things that your body is trying to protect you from. Sometimes the work avoidance is actually a sign that maybe you're over capacity or you need a break. You need to take a walk. Your system's just saying, hey, let's rest before we move forward. But it is important to know that you will still have to move forward.
Yeah, it's like the mind and body are 2 to 3 steps ahead of you,
Right.
which is crazy.
It could be sending an invoice or writing a blog post or writing a podcast episode. I'm not a big procrastinator, but I did procrastinate on writing this particular episode, which is so funny because it's about exactly that. And I was up at 10 o'clock last night trying to figure out writing this episode. I think that for me, when I stopped to think about it, it was because I'm not a big procrastinator. I wasn't really sure what exactly to talk about in the episode.
That makes sense.
It's kind of like writer's block.
Yeah, you had to do some research and get clear.
Yeah, because I'm not an expert on it.
Yeah, fair. That's a good thing.
Not an expert on the topic. But here we are. I did it anyway. So look at me go. Good times. Anyway, it's more about finding out what the real issue is behind why you aren't doing that particular task.
Totally. All right, so I think this is kind of fun. Let's talk about the 5 types of procrastinators. This part's always really eye-opening when you look at it. By identifying which type you are, you can really figure out more about how to get unstuck. So the first one is the perfectionist. This person sets super high standards and avoids starting because they're afraid the result won't meet their ideal. The antidote here is learning to start messy. I really like that. Start messy. A helpful trick is a 70% rule. If it's 70% good, it's more than good enough to move forward. Remember, you can't edit a blank page, which is really interesting because you've said more than once when you're talking about your business, white space, that anything is editable.
I always say that.
It's so fascinating because you're not a procrastinator. So you always get something down on the paper, on the computer.
I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about it beforehand, but I do always just jump right in.
And like the saying goes, done is better than perfect.
Yeah, having something to show is better than not having something to show for sure. You know, even if it's only 70%.
Yeah, 100% agree. Next is the dreamer. They have big ideas, lots of vision, but they get really overwhelmed when it's time to take action. The trick here is something called chunking, breaking down your beautiful dream into tiny steps. Ask yourself, what can I do in the next 5 minutes?
Seems like such a short amount of time, but it could be a really powerful 5 minutes if you let it.
Yeah, I mean, I love that idea of setting a timer for that amount of time and kind of racing yourself in what you can get done.
My grandma used to do that. She would set a timer for 20 minutes to get certain things done.
I've seen people on social media. I mean, obviously, people on social media record themselves doing millions of mundane things, but I've seen people show in time lapse them cleaning for 20 minutes, and it is amazing what you can get done.
Yeah. The third is the worrier. This person avoids because of fear of not being good enough, rejection, the unknown. And here, the concept of reframing really helps. Instead of asking, what if I fail? Ask, what's the best possible outcome? Or what would I do if I couldn't mess this up? What if it all works out?
I love that expression.
Yeah, what if all your dreams come true?
It makes you feel fearless.
Yeah,
Probably why your word is fearless and you're not a procrastinator.
probably. The fourth is the crisis maker. We all know crisis makers.
Oh, yes.
And you know who you are if you're a crisis maker.
Everything is an emergency.
You live in the chaos.
Yes.
You swear that you work best under pressure, and you might, sure. But what's the cost of that? I mean, you're probably stressed most of the time. You probably have anxiety. You probably aren't sleeping well. So instead of this, and I learned this tip in our mastermind, give yourself a fake deadline. That way you finish earlier than expected, which maybe will give you time to edit and make it better if you have to. And you can reward yourself for finishing early, kind of make a game out of it.
Give yourself a little treat. You know how we feel about treats.
You do. And you can make it fun if you want to. Or it's just like, okay, now that project's done, I can cross it off my list. But don't tell yourself, oh, that's just a fake deadline.
So true. Yeah,
because your brain can play the trick. You know it's a fake deadline.
that's so true.
And then you can say, well, that deadline's fake anyways. I don't need to do it by that day.
Mark it on the calendar and really go for it.
Yeah, really tell yourself that that is the deadline.
Yeah, I love that.
Because people are going to be happier when you deliver something earlier anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, under promise and over deliver. Anyway, the last one is the busy bee, and you know who you are. This person is always doing something, not usually the thing that actually matters. They feel productive. This is actually another form of avoidance.
Why am I picturing every husband when there's company about to come over?
Oh my gosh, what is that? The avoider.
You're avoiding by doing other things that
Yes.
don't need to be done as urgently. That really goes back to our priorities episode.
Yeah, finding the right timing for doing things is also very important.
Read the room.
So, a good strategy for this is to go back to our priority episode, re listen to it, and think about the Eisenhower matrix that we talk about, or the different 1-3-5 rules. There's one big task, three medium tasks, or five small tasks that you can get done each day. You can be a busy bee, that's great, but be a busy bee where it matters.
Yeah, make sure you're focusing on the right things.
Yeah.
So, we were talking a lot about our real life experiences with procrastination in preparation for this episode. You kind of mentioned already that you aren't a procrastinator. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I choose peace of mind. I don't like to feel rushed, as I've mentioned before in other episodes. I don't like that pressure. I don't like that stress. And so my mindset is to get things done right away so I don't have to worry about it. We also talked about how I like to be in control of situations. And I think this started really young for me, but it all helps with time management and it all allows me not to procrastinate. I know my priorities. I know what I'm in control of and what I'm not in control of, and I can set my tasks and day around that. But really, since I was little, I haven't procrastinated. And the more that I started to think about it, no one in my immediate family is procrastinators. Like nobody in the immediate family I grew up with, so my parents and brothers are not procrastinators. None of us.
So, is it nature or is it nurture?
Right. That is exactly what I was thinking. And interestingly enough, a large part is hereditary.
That makes sense.
It's genetic,
It's
people.
in your blood.
46% of procrastination is due to genetic influences.
Huh.
It's almost half. That's not to say, like, as an excuse of why you're a procrastinator, like, oh, it's genetics, so I get to procrastinate.
No, it's just something to recognize
Yeah.
and to account for in how you do things.
Yeah. I mean, the rest is personality traits, lack of information, maybe environmental factors, everything else we've talked about. I just thought it was so interesting. Really large chunk of it is purely genetics at work.
Yeah.
And it makes you really wonder, like, maybe if somebody was born with a non-procrastinator gene and was adopted by procrastinators, what would their life be like? Would they just be
Oh,
stressed all the time?
so interesting.
Like, why aren't these people getting the work done?
Seriously. Oh, wow.
Interestingly enough, I was talking to my mom about this. I have an older brother who's about a year and a half older. And so he was always just one grade above me in school. And when he was in fourth grade, my mom was on a walk with one of her friends whose daughters was in his same class. And this other mom was just like freaking out about this project that was due. They had this really big thing they had to be working on. And my mom knew nothing about it. So she went to the school that day and talked to the teacher and said, "What is this really big project? I haven't heard anything about it." And the teacher said, "Well, that's because he's already done. It was in his desk. He was ready to go."
Oh my gosh.
We just aren't wired the same way
Yeah.
because our thought is, why wouldn't I just get this done?
That's such an amazing skill to have at such a young age.
I know, super impressive. He's like 9 years old and he's just getting his work done. But the thing is I've mentioned this before. All three of us are also entrepreneurs, as well as my mom and dad and grandparents. Obviously, there is some sort of gene that says you are a self motivator.
Yeah.
You get things done. You do the work. You jump in head first and you just go for it. Everything is editable.
Yes. There must be some sort of self starter gene.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up. You had mentioned for you the procrastination is because of perfectionism. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. And I hope that some of you can relate and I hope it makes you feel more normal. For me, procrastination really isn't about laziness. It's a combination of overcommitting, perfectionism, and waiting for that quote unquote perfect time to tackle something big. Most of the things that I personally procrastinate on aren't simple tasks, they're full on projects. I rarely, as a mom, have a huge block of uninterrupted time. And so I keep pushing off these big projects thinking, oh, I'll do that when I can really focus and knock it all out at once. But not surprisingly, that perfect window never appears. And so the projects just linger for me. And so then when I do try to squeeze it into smaller chunks of time, it feels inefficient. I'm starting and stopping so much that I lose momentum and clarity. And then it ends up taking way longer than if I had just tackled it in one go. So then I just avoid it altogether.
When you were talking about trying to do all the things, like squeezing it into smaller chunks of time or all of the why you're not doing it,
Yeah.
I could feel my heart start to pump.
Yeah. Which is interesting because we've talked about too that I'm a little more prone to anxiety, whereas you're not. And so I wonder what the correlation between that is. Like, obviously, this gives anxiety, but I wonder if my struggle with anxiety has led to the perfectionism or what's cause and effect, I guess.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And for me, I think I'm just sitting here thinking, like, just get it done.
Exactly. Exactly. I think too, for me, and this is something I didn't think about, I tend to procrastinate on things that are just for me, that feel
Oh,
selfish.
shocker.
Yeah.
I think that's so common, especially with moms, that you procrastinate on things that are for you or about you
Yeah.
because you have so many other people in your life that you have to worry about that you put yourself last.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that in our priorities episode, but I'm going to prioritize something that's for my family. But at some point, you have to realize that you might just be avoiding self care. And I don't mean self care like lying in a bath eating chocolate, although that sounds great, but cleaning out my closet, which is a disaster. This might be a real life example because I will feel so much better getting ready in the morning.
Okay, so that is also something I'm procrastinating on. It's cleaning out my closet. I'm in the process, as all of our listeners know,
Yeah.
of cleaning out multiple closets in our house. And it's so overwhelming. But what I keep thinking about when we're talking is something that I mentioned in our priority episode that was what's one thing you can do that would help you breathe easier?
Oh, I love that.
I've been thinking about that since we recorded that. And I had this project for a client, and it was one of those, for me, not urgent and not important.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still on my to-do list and I knew I had to do it, but they gave me a really long timeline for it and I was going to do it right away and then another project came up, whatever. I knocked it down on my priority list because it wasn't important and urgent. I realized that it was just hanging over my head. It wasn't due yet, but it was just hanging there. And so yesterday I just knocked it out because I will breathe easier if this specific project is no longer on my to-do list.
I love that phrasing too. Breathe easier because it's not about urgency. It's not about importance. It's not about anything that you have to quantify. It's about a feeling.
Yeah, it's about self-care.
Yeah.
What will help you breathe easier if it was no longer on your to-do list?
We should start trying to do one small task each day to help us breathe easier.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, I like that too.
Report back.
I actually did come up with a few other tips too, if people are like me. And I think that this could be useful to more than just the perfectionist procrastinator. But again, 5 tips. Number 1, break the project into realistic chunks and not vague steps. So really get specific. Don't write something like launch your new website. Give yourself the specific task of write the headline for the homepage or something like that, you know? When the task is too big or too vague, it's going to be impossible to start. Number 2, time block the tiniest possible window. I mean, we just talked about that. 5 minutes, literally schedule 15 minutes and do just one piece of the project and not to finish it, but just with the goal of starting. That's something that I'm really, really going to try to do post episode.
That goes back to our starting a business episode where we say start at 222, start in your 40s, start late, start early,
Just start.
start the project.
And just like we were talking about with starting a business in a different way with the projects, but you gain momentum and you might just keep going. And even if you don't, you've still started it and that's progress.
Yeah, it's the ripple effect.
Yes.
One thing can lead to finishing.
Yeah, I love that. And then number 3, ditch the fantasy of the perfect work window, which I just mentioned is my issue. When you're waiting for the perfect conditions, like a quiet house to edit the podcast, or no other deadlines or 4 free hours, it's a trap. Life doesn't pause, and progress in imperfect conditions is better than no progress at all.
Yep, rain or shine, the show must go on.
I don't know why, but that just reminded me of it doesn't even make sense. Whatever happened to predictability? It's a Full House theme, but do they say rain or shine?
And I don't know, but now try to get it out of your
Oh,
head.
God.
Anyway, I was just saying, the event happens, rain or shine.
Yeah. Number 4 is create an open loop system. And this is really interesting. I've honestly never thought about this having a term, but it's the idea of leaving yourself a clear marker of where to pick up next time. Leave yourself a Post-it or write a sentence in your notes that tells you your next step is to clean out this drawer. It saves time and it makes re-entry into the task so much easier.
It's like opposite breadcrumbs.
Yeah, so true.
It's like your map, your roadmap.
Hansel and Gretel, but in reverse.
Yeah.
And then the last tip is celebrate the start and not the finish.
Ooh, I love that.
Me too. And it kind of goes back to tip 3 where just start. But I love the idea of just really being so proud of yourself for actually starting the task, no matter how far you get into it.
So this actually does relate. I'm going to go back to our closets. It's like all that I can think about. In the process of doing my daughter's closet, we emptied the entire closet, but not only the closet, it led to us emptying so many other things in the room. So her desk, her stuffed animal bin, her jewelry box, everything. And now everything that she's keeping is in a pile on the floor. And it's so overwhelming for her because she comes in and all she sees is a mess. And I keep saying, we're going to organize it. We're going to sort these into bins. We're going to have a new system. It's going to be so nice when we're done. And all she can focus on is the mess that's right in front of her, which is totally fair.
Yeah, it must seem so overwhelming to her brain.
It is because clutter is overwhelming. We need that white space, but we need the space in our brain.
Yeah.
It's taking longer than we had anticipated to get through everything. And I love this celebrate the start. And so I feel like today I need to go in there and just celebrate that we've even made it as far as we have and that we have started the process of decluttering.
Yeah. And then use another tip like setting a 10-minute timer.
You are full of good ideas.
I know, right? Oh, I love that.
And also, if you couldn't tell, we're learning right along with you.
Seriously, we'll report back. So we just talked about a few tips, but I want to talk about bigger concepts, and that's tools. I know we've both come up with a few tools we think could work. First is something called the Pomodoro technique, and this is a lifesaver for someone like me who has trouble just getting started. And as we talked about before, it's the concept of setting a timer. In this case, they say 25 minutes, focus on one task, and then take a 5-minute break. It literally tricks your brain into thinking, I only have to do this for a little while. And like we talked about, that's usually enough to get the momentum going. What I really liked and why I mentioned it again is that 5-minute break.
Yes.
Really planning in, I get to rest. Another tool or technique that I really like is body doubling. It's amazing. It's where you do a task with someone else nearby, either in person or virtually, and it creates a low-key sense of accountability and you feel less alone in the work.
So it's not cloning.
No.
No.
That would be smart though, have 2 people to do the work versus 1.
Be so much easier.
But you and I do that. Sometimes we intend to record and then we both have to get some work done and it just kind of flows. It kind of makes sense. Or I do that if I have to work in my office at night. I make my husband come downstairs and play with Legos down here. And just knowing he's right there, I kind of have that sense of accountability. I don't have FOMO either. That's another thing.
Yeah, because you're like, well, what are they doing that's so fun?
Yeah.
I do love the body doubling, though. I think we've mentioned in a previous episode about the mountain analogy, how it's not steep when you're with somebody else. And so having somebody there to do your mundane tasks, like you guys could both be doing your mundane tasks and commiserating on how you don't want to do them.
Yeah. I have a friend that I call and she calls me generally when we're emptying the dishwasher or doing laundry. And it makes those things so much nicer.
That's a fun thing to do. I should find a friend for that. Phone a friend
Oh
when
my
I do
goodness.
laundry. We would be talking all day, every Sunday.
Something else I actually just thought of with body doubling is I wonder if that's why you and I like to either have a comfort show on in the background when we're working, or I really love having audiobooks and podcasts on when I'm doing mundane tasks.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, music makes things more fun, but it doesn't feel like that's it.
It's not the same for me. Like, listening to music is one thing, and that's fine, and it's fun, and I love music, obviously. We talk about music all the time. But it's true, having the background noise of people talking
Yeah,
is a different vibe. I never thought about that.
look at us.
I really do love that. It must be it. Another tool that you could use is task bracketing. So it's when you sort of sandwich a hard task or a boring task, something you don't want to do, in between two things you really love to do.
Ooh, more treats.
Well, sort of, except the treat is the doing.
Yeah.
So if you have something that you love to do and or two some things you love to do. So for me, if I had two things that needed to be designed and then the middle thing was reconcile my accounts,
Mhm.
I'm going to get through my one design and then I'm going to reconcile my accounts because I know that the reward is to get back into design.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or you could do it where you would have your coffee and then you would pay your bills and then maybe you go for a walk. Enjoy, don't enjoy, enjoy. What do they say? Like compliment, slap, compliment.
Oh, that's funny. I've never heard that.
So it's like you give the good, the bad, and then, end with something good so that everybody leaves feeling positive.
Yeah.
We talked about reframing, or for me, who's in design, I could call it rebranding a task. And so instead of saying, I have to clean the kitchen or, oh, I have to clean my office, it's like, well, I'm going to reset my space. It's the same task, but the energy just changes when you think of it as like a reset versus a clean.
Yeah, that reminds me of I get to versus I have to.
Yes, exactly.
I get to clean my beautiful house versus I have to clean the house.
Yeah. I get to live in this beautiful space, so let me make it livable.
Yeah.
And that goes back to our energy, which we feel like we talk about in every episode, our mindset and our energy. So if you just pay attention to when you're naturally more focused, which we did talk about in human design, I can rock midday.
Yeah.
I'm all about lunch. Actually, that's funny because I'm not all about lunch. I'm just all about focusing midday, which is probably why I don't have lunch.
Yeah, that's probably why you skip lunch.
Because I'm so focused. But it's best to schedule your hardest stuff when you're naturally at your best. Working with your rhythms and not against them could be really helpful as well.
I've been looking into cycle syncing a lot. So I think that's something we could talk about potentially in our perimenopause episode. But really knowing for women what weeks of the month that you're going to be better at certain tasks too.
Ooh,
Yeah. It's kind of awesome.
yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear about that.
So, one more thing before we wrap it up, I want to talk about an intentional delay versus classic procrastination. And there is a difference. And I think naming that can help ease your guilt and also build better self awareness. Here are 5 legitimate reasons to delay, which we also like to refer to as an intentional pause. Number 1, you're waiting on essential information or input. So, you're waiting for a client's feedback, you're waiting for a number, a budget to be approved. It's not procrastination, it's dependency. Number 2, you're prioritizing something more urgent or time sensitive. And obviously, that goes back to prioritization. Sometimes there are things that are actually more important in that moment. It's called triaging, not procrastination.
It's like working at a hospital.
Exactly.
Choosing what's the most important thing to manage in that moment.
Yes. Number 3, you're giving yourself space to strategically pause. Like we said, an intentional pause. You're intentionally stepping back from a decision so that you don't rush it. You need that clarity.
Actually, interestingly enough about this one, I went to a Q&A when I was in grad school, and the woman hosting it is a graphic design celebrity, for lack of a better phrase. When it came time to ask questions, I asked, what do you do when you're feeling a creative block? When you're feeling like you can't move forward on a design project? And she said, I go for a walk. I step away from the project and give myself space. She strategically pauses and removes herself completely from the building and goes for a walk somewhere to reset her creativity and her brain.
So many benefits. That intentional pause, but also the fresh air.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
So simple, but so profound.
Yeah. I mean, just a great tip. That was 12 years ago, and I still think about that.
I will remember that for sure. I need to do that more.
I do too. I was actually just thinking, I think about her saying that,
Yeah.
and then I don't do it.
Yeah. Because I think for me, I'm just more prone to power through.
Me too.
There could be a better way, a gentler way of handling it.
Like going for a walk.
Yeah. So, number 4 is kind of related. You're protecting your energy or your mental health. So, if you're burnt out, you're anxious, you're emotionally drained, hello, moms, taking a break or slowing down is really wise. Rest is not procrastination, it's maintenance.
Ooh,
Yeah, it's necessary.
it is. But don't use it as an excuse to procrastinate.
Totally. The last one is that you're in a creative incubation phase. So, kind of like we talked about with stepping away, taking a walk, but there are some tasks, like in designing, that can genuinely benefit from mental simmering.
Ooh, mental simmering.
Such a great phrase.
That's what I do
Yeah.
before I get started on a project. Because remember, I said I spend so much time thinking, and that's what it is. It's mental simmering on the project, which allows me to just sit down and do.
And it's such a necessary step.
Huge.
That delay can actually lead to better results.
There you go. It's like sketching before you jump into the computer to design,
Yeah.
if you're a sketcher. Let's move on to signs that it's actually procrastination.
Yeah. I'm really interested.
So the first one is that you keep telling yourself, I'll have more time or motivation later, because the reality is you don't. And that's the perfectionism trap when you're waiting for ideal conditions that don't exist. So we talked about this in starting a business. If you're waiting for the right moment, you're never going to be ready. The second one is you're doing less important tasks to avoid the big one. You're the busy bee.
Yep.
You're suddenly deep cleaning the fridge instead of writing what you need to, or finding a million other things to do instead of doing what actually needs to be done. That's procrastination. Those are nice to have done, whereas you need to focus on what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
The third is you feel guilt, stress, or shame every time you think about it. So the emotional weight is a sign that you're avoiding and not pausing intentionally.
Ooh, that one hits deep because it's like you feel that in your gut.
Yeah, that one's personal, isn't it? It's like, man,
Yeah.
but that's the doing one thing that helps you breathe easier.
Yeah. If you're not breathing easy, that's why.
Check yourself. 4 is that you've started lying to yourself about how long the task is going to take.
Ooh.
I can totally get this done tomorrow. It's not going to take that long. I'm going to get this done tomorrow. What do they say? Why put off to tomorrow what you can do today?
Yeah.
And then by the time you've said that 3 times, and then it's Friday, let's be real. And that's just classic.
Yep.
Classic procrastination. And then the last one is that you're overwhelmed by the size of the task and avoiding the start.
Yeah. Just like we were talking about with me.
Yeah. It's not that you can't do it. You've just psyched yourself out of starting.
Yep. Just start. So the key difference to note is that an intentional delay is conscious and strategic, whereas procrastination is unconscious or avoidance based.
I think people know when they're avoiding.
I think so too.
I also think that even though I'm not a procrastinator, I know I have things I'm avoiding doing.
That makes sense.
Just like certain little things.
But I think procrastination is something that has to get done.
Yeah,
You don't
true.
necessarily need to make any changes with your closet.
Right, true.
You know it'll make you breathe easier, but you're not pushing it back on the timeline of when it's due, I guess.
You know what is another one is updating my website
Ah,
as I'm avoiding for some reason.
interesting. I wonder why.
I think because it's personal.
Personal in terms of that you feel like you'll be putting yourself out there when you change it?
No, personal in terms of there's other tasks.
Ah,
It's a nice to have.
yeah. You already have your client base. You don't need to bring anyone new on. Self-care, even in a
Right.
business sense. That makes sense.
So I just haven't done it. I'm going to give myself a deadline. I'm just going to put it on my to-do list.
Love it.
Taking my own advice.
So as usual, let's wrap this up with some heart. If you're stuck right now, if your to-do list is full, but your motivation is lacking, you're not broken. You're probably tired, you need a nap, or overwhelmed or scared, and that's okay. Be kind to yourself.
Give yourself grace. You don't need to hustle your way out of avoidance. You need clarity, maybe some support, and a lot of kindness. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is rest. Sometimes you need to just start small. You can restart at any time. Everything is editable. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to take breaks. And then you can come back when you're ready.
That makes me think about the phrase, it's not a bad life, it's just a bad day. I try to tell my kids that it's not a bad day, it's just a bad moment, or it was a hard moment. We'll sometimes have rough mornings and we'll rewind as a family, and just kind of go back. Like you just said, you can restart your day anytime.
Yeah, when we have rough mornings, usually in the car, I say, "Okay, let's reset."
Yeah. We like to physically rewind,
Of
get some,
course you
gets
do.
like the energy, out. So moving on to our regular segments.
Do you have a win for this week?
Yeah, I do. In the spirit of this episode being about procrastination and work avoidance, I mentioned that I am a perfectionist procrastinator. And one of the things that I really have been trying to work on lately, to be honest, in light of our household management and priorities episodes, is really melding all those things together. And a lot of that has been asking for help from my husband. I don't know if I mentioned this, but we recently did decide to split up household chores like you and Tim do, where my husband is now kind of in charge of the dishes and I'm in charge of laundry. And it's been really helpful for me because I do feel like for a family of 4, we just are constantly running the dishwasher. And it just feels like it's something that takes up a surprising amount of time. That has taken a lot off my plate. It made me realize too that it's okay to ask for help for things that are strictly for me. I recently decided I wanted to rearrange our room a little bit. Mine and Arthur's room, not yours and my room.
I think this office is yours in my room.
Yeah, it really is. But I wanted to put a vanity that I had, kind of like a vanity desk from West Elm, back in our room. I needed some help doing that. And it just felt like it was something that I wasn't procrastinating on, but I wasn't making it a priority. And so while I was doing something with the kids, I asked my husband if he would do it. Just kind of asking him to do it and him taking the lead on it and kind of engaging me when he needed me to do something really made it happen a lot faster. And it was so nice. It felt like one of those self-care things where I decided that I wanted to use this for my morning routine, which I'm going to incorporate now. Getting it done, not putting it off, prioritizing, asking for help. I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a big win for me.
And I'm sure it helped you breathe easier.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. It really did. It was such a nice feeling.
That's awesome.
Shout out to my husband. He's wonderful with that stuff. So, what about you? What is your song for the week?
So I picked a song that's called Runaway by Ziggy Alberts. And I love this song. I mostly love the beat of the song and just the way that it flows, not necessarily what he's saying, because he's talking about protecting his heart from someone.
Oh, depressing as usual. No, I'm just kidding.
Shocker. I'm not going to go into the lyrics of this one, but he just is talking about how she's the one to run away. And so
Oh.
he's guarding himself. But I was more thinking about it in terms of you don't have to do all of these things.
Protecting your peace in this situation.
Oh my gosh. Yes. See, that's why I need you.
I wish you guys could have seen Carly's face right there because it was the best.
I mean, it was like a light bulb just went off. It was so good. You can run away from what's not serving you.
Yes.
You don't have to stay in it.
It's okay to say no.
Ah, yes. Get your punch card and say no.
Love it.
That's it. I mean, just go listen to it. It's so much fun. I love it.
I'll put the link to our You Handled That Perfectly playlist on Spotify in the episode show notes. You can also find it in our Instagram profile or on our website.
All right. Well, that's all for today.
Thanks for joining us. See you in 2 weeks.
If you like this episode, you can follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, sharing is caring. So like, follow, and share. For more information or behind the scenes content, sign up for our newsletter on our website at youhandledthatperfectly.com/podcast. In case no one told you today,
You handled that perfectly.
bye.